Hello, listeners, and welcome to this third and final part of the mini-series titled A Break in the Fog. For more information about Molly and her writing, you can visit www.abreakinthefog.com. But for now, here is Molly Salans. I am familiar with this particular person's MO around taking children, giving other people's children away to other people, unofficially, privately, or illegally. So I am really glad that it had the rational effect on you rather than the cult effect on you, and you were able to.
For some reason, the cult leader called Michael. Now, I don't know if there had already been lawsuits against them for her to do that, because she didn't have to do that. I would have given Sarah to Susan because I was so brainwashed and so completely and absolutely shattered that I would have done that, except that Michael would have had to have met them at the airport, and then that could have created, maybe she thought that through, or she's just loony. But other things, happened there. She introduced me to somebody that I fell madly in love with. He was in New York, I was in Boston. I met his family. I adored him. And then I guess I was kicked out for bad behavior, for negativity, or whatever it was, at the point where I was crazy with love for him. And then the male cult leader kicks me out for um I can tell you, I think it was that time. I'm trying to remember. I was kicked out twice, and the second time I didn't go back at the height of my love for this person. So then we weren't allowed to talk to each other. And I called him. He said, "Don't call me anymore." And then I begged to get back. And by the time I got back 6 months later, it was on a retreat, and he had been introduced to somebody else. And it completely shattered me because I was going back for him. And then, people surrounded me and said, you got to cut it out. It's over, blah, 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 blah. And I couldn't get over it very well. But then he was kicked out. And I think he and this other woman broke up. I'm trying to remember all the sequences of it. And he was in New York and I was in Boston. And I think I tried to contact him and he wanted nothing to do with me. So I think a year and a half went by. And then the cult leader called me at home. This was very unusual. The woman called me and she said, he's gone missing. We don't know where he is. And he was rising to the top at that point. And he said, we don't know where he is. And I said, well, I haven't talked to him for a year and a half. I have no idea where he is. And the cult leader said, well, you need to call his parents and find out what happened to him. And you need to tell them that he's been coming up to see you and he missed a time and you can't get a hold of him. So, terrified to say no, I called his parents, who I hadn't talked to for 2 years, and I really liked them. And they said, well, he's been taking money out of his account. And I said, oh, that's because he's been coming to see me. And they were both on the phone. They both felt quiet because I had no idea how much money he was taking out of his account. And then she said, well, he was found walking the streets of Manhattan and he's now in a mental hospital. So the cult broke him down. Highly intelligent, really passionate guy. And the cult completely broke him down. And when I called the cult leader to tell her that, she told me I was a fucking liar. I said, and then his friends called me and said, that can't be true. I said, call his parents. Maybe they're lying. You call them now. Bombard them, see how they feel, you know. So the David character is fashioned after the guy I love so much, but I was never coerced into sex ever. I know that there have been reports of very deep sexual abuse. Lots of physical abuse went on. In meetings, one guy was, I'll just call them Philip and Jim. Philip wasn't doing his job. And so Jim got up and punched him in the nose right in front of us. And they got into this sprawling fight. And the Damien figure, who is not who you think it was laughing and just said, good job, Jim. See, Phil, you really had to get the shit knocked out of you. Men were encouraged to beat up their wives for not behaving. I was in one meeting, a group meeting, where a guy named Matt was divorcing his wife and they had kids. And he was saying, she's asking for all this money and I just don't have it. And the woman cult leader said to him, oh, just start sleeping with her again. She'll give you everything you want.
She's such a misogynist. For a woman, she is was such a misogynist of the deepest, most depraved.
Oh, she was absolutely crazy. And it was true that during one meeting, when she came to visit, it was like the Queen of England is coming. Everything had to be cleaned to the utmost. The altar had to be such. She had to have her whiskey, her coffee. And she was not like Helen, but she was very, very elegant. And she'd walk in. And then at one point, she turned her back on us and she had a piece of Kleenex in her hand. And the Damien figure was like, you guys are making her cry. She loves you so much and you have no questions for her. Well, if anybody asked a question, they were completely demolished for asking it. It was a stupid question. Don't you have anything better to ask her? So we were all severely punished for making her cry. She had come all this way from New York just to give us all of her love and answer as many questions as she could. Yeah, so I was not only hit by Michael, and we ended up divorcing anyway. It was a very bad marriage. And then I started running the daycare center, and I was socked in the face by my cohort. I was not doing my job. I wasn't clean enough. I mean, you could eat off the floor, and she hit me in the face a few times. And I was just like, I have to. And then by 85, I'd had enough and I was just shattered and done. And oh, that was the summer I was on the retreat. And in the very beginning, we were studying particular people, and I had a gift of memorizing and I had a gift of speaking, which I didn't know at the time. So I was able to memorize these passages and just say them from my heart because they were spiritual in nature. And one thing the cult did do for me was bring out my longing to know God. It was just very weird. We studied a lot of different spiritual people, and they appealed to me. So what the work I was doing appealed to me. And then that last summer I was there, apparently nothing I did was helping the energy. Everything I did was negative. So I was sent into solitary confinement. And I was there for 3 days, and people brought me food and brought me wood for the fire. And I think my daughter was with me, and I had enough things. I was finally able to spend time with her. So it was good for us, just like when Clara was sent to solitary confinement. And then when I came back into the meeting, I had memorized another passage, and I said, I'd like to, I have a poem or whatever it was, an essay I'd like to recite. And the male guy who's just looked at me and he said, you've already started this all wrong. This isn't yours. This was the author's. How dare you own it? Get out of here. Get out of here. And I was so devastated by his rage And the meeting was ending, and I was gonna go. I didn't have very much to do with him. This was not the Damien character. This was the cult's husband. I really didn't have a whole lot to do with him. I just heard about how harsh he could be, and I'd seen it in meetings, but it had never been directed at me. So I was gonna go up to him to say, of course I didn't know that wasn't mine, but he kind of went into this frozen position, and all of these men kind of circled him and faced me protecting him. I will never forget that image. It was the scariest thing I'd ever seen and felt in my life. And then as I was packing up to go home, the women who I thought I'd made friends with were still yelling at me for making such a horrible mistake after having all this time away. And I just turned to one of them and I said, it's easy to beat a horse when it's already beaten, isn't it? And I wanted to say this is what we all do to each other, but those were my last remarks to her. And so I was still pretty brainwashed. I thought that the cult leader knew about children and knew how to raise them. So I was still calling and asking about what I should do with my daughter. There are certain questions I had. She was going to turn 5 in November, and I wanted to enroll her in kindergarten. Was it okay? Should I wait a year? And in the end, I followed my own heart and enrolled her. And then the freedom of not having to go out at night, of not to recruit people, the freedom of not having to find a babysitter. I had absolutely no money because it had all gone to the cult. There was a point where they were traveling to Israel for something, and we had to pay for 20 people's airfare, hotel fare, food, and tours. Um, I was just flat out broke the entire time I was there. And then to be able to have money, even if I didn't have any savings, to keep my checks and to keep the money I was earning, and to get my mind back and to understand, to find a therapist. But I was sworn to such secrecy that I never told my therapist I was in this group. Never. I was in therapy every day for every week for 7 years to get myself back. But I never told her I was in a cult because I didn't know at the time that I was. And I never talked about the group. It was so deeply ingrained that this was a secret. And there's such a sense of loyalty within me. It's one of my deepest traits. And maybe there was some shame involved to say anything. And maybe I needed all that time to recover. And my ex and I stayed friends and we raised our daughter together. And when we were driving her to school in New York when she was 18, or on the way back, I asked him if he had ever had nightmares, if he was still having nightmares about this group, because I was still having nightmares. And that's when he told me he was in a cult. We were in a cult, and that's when he told me he was having an affair the entire time we were married, because that's what the male cult leader encouraged: have affairs, do whatever you want, lie to your wife. She doesn't have to know these things, be a man. So it was a lot of psychological and physical abuse, a lot. And the physical abuse was just laughed at. This woman punched me. I didn't even tell people that I was punched because it was so embarrassing. It was so shaming. And I didn't want anybody to know. So I left. I got my life back together. At the encouragement of my therapist, I went back to school. I became a therapist and found out I was in a cult. And around that time, I had a client who I really liked, and she came back in to see me. And she told me she had joined this secret school and that they had told her she was very negative and that she needed to see a therapist. And my mouth dropped. And I asked her I named the people in the group and I asked her if this was the same group, and she was very, very surprised. I said, "Did you know everything you tell me is confidential? Do they know you're seeing a therapist?" She said, "Yes." I said, do they know you're seeing me?" She said, "Yes." I said, "That's hugely surprising. I would leave before you're kicked out. And I know you. And if a stranger asked me to describe you, the last word, I wouldn't even begin to describe you as negative. Um, Maybe you have some depression, but I would never call you negative. Um, and everything they're telling you is a lie." And I told her the truth. I said, "I started that group and I'm not proud of it. And if you want to know more, I'd be happy to meet with you and tell you more, but get out of there as fast as you can." And she did.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So a lot of strange things happened when I was writing the book. At first, I was writing things exactly as they happened, and I joined an adult ed writing class in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And so at this time, I was telling everybody I was in a cult, including Steve Hassan, who's a world, Steve. And I had read his book and I had known him personally just briefly for a little bit of time. So I decided to call him and tell him that I was in a cult and which one. And he said, "Oh, funny enough, I'm debriefing somebody from that cult right now. Do you want to come to a session?" I said, "Hell yes." And then in that moment, like 2 or 3 days later, a week before I'm supposed to go into the session, Susan calls me. Now, one thing that we did in this cult was we wrote a lot. And I love to write poetry. So I think I wrote a paper, I think I wrote some poems, and the male cult leader told me I was the worst writer that had ever lived, and that I was not honest, and that I needed to really get in touch with my true self before I could ever write again, and to read Susan's work. I can't prove it. I didn't keep her writings, but I think she plagiarized the Psalms and put her name to them and handed them in. They were, because they were, I didn't read the Psalms, not till later. I get dabbled here and there, but they were familiar to me. And I thought, I wonder if Susan played. So Susan calls me and she says, and I was so shocked to hear from her. It'd been years and she'd been kicked out. And I'm told now she's running the group. And so Susan said to me, "I hear you're writing again." And I said, "What?" She said, "I hear you're writing again. And I just wanted to touch base with you." And it scared me so much because somebody in that class was not only actively in the group, but had known the history of San Francisco. So I called Steve. I said, "Oh my God." And he said, "Invite her to the meeting." I said, "No, no, 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 no. You don't know who Susan is. You don't want her at the meeting." And so when I went to the meeting, the guy who's being debriefed said, "I just want you to know you don't have to worry about anything that you're writing because I'm pretty at the top, and I'm trying to get the woman I love out of there. And once we're out, the whole structure is going to collapse and they're going to have to redo it all. And they're really going to be concerned about the restructuring of the cult and not about your writing." So I quit the class and didn't stop writing, but it was pretty shocking.
I can't believe the direction that this conversation has gone in today. I really didn't expect it to take these twists and turns.
I did not either. And um, I don't know what else I can say about that
Yeah.
experience. Kids were really being swapped right and left, and they still are, as far as I know. I went to an ex-member meeting years later, and there was one of the women who said, "Oh yeah, my kids went over to their house and stayed there for a year, and then they came back with the other kids, and she seemed a little psychotic and talking about it like, how can that not make a mother crazy to keep swapping your kids like that? I was just like,
So, such a wild thing that's happened. In the book, A Break in the Fog, it's really towards the end that the dramatization, fictionalized version of events starts to take place, and there's a crescendo of events, um, as is typical with psychological thrillers, that happens, and that is really why I think people should pick up a copy of this book and read it. It is it's amazing to read a memoir and to read people's first person experiences, and to kind of live life through the eyes of the author as they recall their memories, but with a fictionalized version of a cultic experience. All of those things that we understand, cult terminology and tactics, methodologies, it's all there, but you also have the added kind of altering of reality that comes with getting lost in a fictional book. So, of course, memoir has its merits, and I love reading people's memoirs, but I also do enjoy fiction from time to time because escaping from reality is one of the perks of reading fiction. And I also do realize the parallels with escape and reality is also one of the reasons why people might often get swept up in cults. I not that has not gone over my head, I realize as I say it. But the ending of A Break in the Fog is just completely something else. I was not expecting it. I was trying to think, how is this gonna end? And so people really do need to pick up a copy to just read the whole story, and and understand why the book has been so greatly received. So I wondered if you could just tell the listeners, how has the book been received?
well, it did win first an award for first place for best historical fiction, a psychological thriller and suspense. I was not expecting that, and I was so thankful to receive it. And I have very beautiful reviews on my website for anybody to look at. There's some really wonderful reviews on Amazon. I'm available for book clubs if you listen to the podcast, but if you want to know more, I'd be really happy to come to your book club. I won't charge you for that. Yes, and all 5-star reviews, of course, are welcome on Amazon. I love to read those, and I would also love to hear about other people's experiences. I am a psychotherapist. I do love to listen to these stories because this book seems to have hit people on all types of levels, on the mental health level, on the addiction level, on the cult level, where some people who have been in abusive relationships, not necessarily a cult, because Steve Hassan did teach me that you can be in a one-person cult as well as in a group cult. Families, as you know, Casey, can be cultish, but so can an abusive relationship that becomes way too controlling, where you don't have your own life anymore. And one thing I do want to say about this cult, which I believe is true for cults in general, is they are really, really clever at making you let go of your family. And that's the first clue of, oh, you don't need to see your mother tonight, or you're always talking to your sister, give that time to me. These types of things are hints that you're starting to be into a controlling relationship. And it happens so subtly that you don't even realize it just makes sense. So yeah, I don't need my mom. In the cult, it was like, be men and women, don't be boys and girls. Why are you still relying on mommy and daddy? And the Damien character was particularly good at going way into your doubts and your hatred of your family around. I'll never forget when the Damien character just singled me out around, you know, why do you hate your parents so much? And I was like, well, my father and I fight, but I don't hate him. He goes, well, what about your mother? And I just started crying because there was so much there with her too. And he got me. He just got me as one of the most understanding people in the world. And I'm much more aware now, thank goodness. And I'm very happy to say that I'm confident enough to talk about this, to write about it. It was a real blessing to finally explore it for myself because, as I say, I was having clients and all of the work I was doing on myself and with my clients just really led me to a need to write this story. And I felt like fiction would be the safest way to do it and far more interesting. Although, I've been thinking about writing this up too in bits and pieces about my real experiences to go along with what was here. And hopefully with the lawyers, okay, I'll be able to name the cult. And if that can happen before this is aired, I'll let you know. And then maybe you don't have to cut all this out.
Wow, yeah, wouldn't that would be something. It would be interesting for listeners to hear sort of unedited mad reactions to things. Um and also to pride myself on how much knowledge I have gained in my 3 years
Yes.
of doing this work. I've impressed myself today.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. I'm very impressed because I thought this was one of the lesser cults. And it was so funny because on Thursday I was on a walk and I keep asking, who else has been in this cult? Who else can I talk with about this? I really want to name it. And then on my walk, I just Googled the cult and up came Spencer's name. And I emailed him yesterday morning and he responded. And we talked just yesterday afternoon for the first time. And
He's
then,
just told me he's just ordered your book.
tell him thank you. I will text him after this. Wow.
He said she suffered a lot, but she's a strong and smart woman, is what he just said.
Oh, thank you, Stephen. Oh, Spencer. I always call him Stephen. So I wish he would represent me, but I think because he's written his own, maybe it's a conflict of interest and he can't. Um, I've written to a lawyer out here in California, and I was thinking of writing him and asking him who his lawyer is, and I don't know if it matters where I'm located.
I don't know if you can see this picture, but this is Esther. She was part of the Boston group. She was brought in. So I would say that this story is now in 3 parts, right? There's you at the beginning, Spencer in the middle in Manhattan, and Esther at the end in Boston.
Oh, Esther's more recent.
She was. So I've got interviews with Spencer and Esther on the show. And then I've got an interview with Spencer and Esther where they compare their experiences, which was quite
Ah,
cool.
so Esther named the cult?
Yeah, she's written a book about it as well, but it's not published yet.
Uh-huh.
I think she's planning to self-publish it in a couple of months.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, I don't know when Esther joined because I left in 1985. So I had just moved to Boston in 79 and it wasn't called what it was. There was no name for it at that point in time. So that must have happened habitually a lot with her. But it would be really fun to be on a podcast with Spencer and Esther and I, if I can.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, I would love that. It was 2006, it's 2006 that she got involved and then left in 2011. But that's oh, it's what so it really is beginning, middle, and end because Spencer was in for 20 odd years and he was kind of slotted in the middle of that. Oh,
Wow. Well, I'm going to work on this more and more to get legal counsel and to see, because Spencer was saying, but you're calling it fiction. And I said, but it's on the back cover. This is loosely based on my experiences. And people are asking, So I wonder if I can get around that. Yes, it's fiction, and I wouldn't have been able to write it so well if I hadn't experienced a cult
Yeah.
myself. So
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see what can we can do. It'd
Yeah,
be,
it's definitely it's definitely worth looking into. I would absolutely love that.
and I'll get legal counsel and see what I can do about this because people keep asking, and I really don't think it's important. However, having it out today has felt so good to me. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, now you just have to write a memoir. That's all you have to do. Just write a memoir. Just
There you go. I could probably do that now. Maybe that is my next story is to write up the what really happened. Um,
wow. Oh my goodness. I'm just looking here. Esther's got a website and all sorts of stuff, and Spencer's got a cult blog where he writes stuff. And yeah, you can listen to our episodes, and I wonder what your reaction would be listening to them. And
I will look for the episodes with Spencer. I'll text him after this is over. Unbelievable.
it's so funny that you just said I've got an interview tomorrow, but you never mentioned who it was with, because if you would have said that, we never would have had that moment, that aha moment in this interview, because you would have already known that I would have known.
It's just better that way that you were able to connect the dots and figure it out. And I could stand amazed. It's just better this way because it just brings up, oh, I only knew about Spencer on Thursday, right? You've known him all this time. And here the three of us are connected in the last 2 days. It's crazy. Last 24 hours, really. Oh, it's so funny.
So, A Break in the Fog is your most recent publication, but you do have other pieces that have been printed. So, can you please tell the listeners about your other writing as well?
So in 2004, Jessica Kingsley Publishers in London, England, I don't think they're called that anymore, published my first book of nonfiction called Storytelling with Children in Crisis. And at the time, I was working for an agency and I was doing home based crisis intervention and going into the homes of impoverished children and working with them and their families. And at the same time that that was happening, I was taking classes in storytelling because I was going around to open mics and discovering that I had a gift for reading poetry and telling stories, not necessarily my stories, but story like fairy tales and legends and researching things. So I decided to, with one family, I had learned from this one storytelling class how to elicit stories from people. So I sat down this one kid who was particularly difficult and I just started to tell him stories because I didn't know what else to do. And he became very, very interested in the stories. And then there was one day where I walked in, I was at a new home, and I think the 5-year-old answered the door and let a perfect stranger in, and mom was sleeping. And he had a couple of younger siblings, and cereal was spread all over the counters, and the 5-year-old kept climbing up to get cookies. It was a mess. What was I supposed to do? I was thinking of leaving, but I just sat down at the kitchen table and started practicing a story that I was going to tell. And the kids came around, what princess you talking about? Why are you talking to yourself? So I said, sit down and I'll tell you a story. And they were fascinated. And then I learned how to elicit original stories from the kids. And eventually, moms were listening outside the room and wanted to contribute. So I compiled a book together of the stories I told these families and the stories the families told back to me. And then I changed the endings of those stories and said, well, what if you thought about it this way instead? And it turned into this lovely book. I do have the rights back and I do plan to republish it. You still can get it on Amazon. It's a little bit more expensive right now, but at some point soon, I hope I will reestablish that book. It's a lovely book, and I'm very, very proud of it. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. And A Break in the Fog is an award-winning psychological thriller fiction book that is available today on all platforms. I was lucky enough to get my copy in the post. Thank you very much, Molly. And I will make sure that I put links to all of your work in the episode description. And you do have a website as well, I believe.
Yes, at breakingthefog.com. Please visit it, read the reviews. And there's a click to Amazon to buy the book. If you would prefer it to buy it from me directly, shoot me an email and I will send you a signed copy and a written note, a handwritten note. So if you want to buy it from me directly, please just shoot me an email at breakingthefog@breakingthefog.com.
That's wonderful. Lovely. And we will be featuring A Break in the Fog as the May monthly memoir book of the month. So if you join in with the giveaway, there's a chance you might just win a copy. So you should head over to social media and do that as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There will be a giveaway for that. Absolutely. Yes.
So thank you so much for your time today, Molly. Thank you for sending me a copy of your book, for taking 13 years to put it out in the world, and for allowing us to see just what can be developed in fiction through your lived experiences, which were absolutely, definitely not fiction. And to be able to piece all parts of the cultiverse together and recognize totalist systems when they are being spoken about in the Vegas terms. And I really feel like I've had an affirming experience during our interview today. And I, as I said, was engrossed in A Break in the Fog from start to finish. And by the end of it, I was kind of left a little bit like, oh my goodness, kind of like exhilarated, but really stressed at the same time, which is what you want when you are looking at escapism. So thank you so much for that and for your time today. I appreciate you and your work.
Thank you so much, Casey. Perhaps we can stay in touch too. It'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Take care, Molly, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
That is the end of this mini series titled A Break in the Fog. For signed copies of Molly's book, you can visit abreakinthefog.com or follow the links in the episode description. To get in touch with me, you can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast.